Ever had a meal that blasted you back to your childhood? For me, that's my grandma's shepherd's pie.
Tell me more. What makes it so special?
Well, I was such a picky eater as a kid, so Grandma would cleverly hide my veggies beneath that creamy layer of mashed potato and ground meat. Totally made me forget about my vegetable aversion. It's warm, hearty, and just the smell of it simmering away on the stovetop can lighten up my mood.
Sure sounds mouth-wateringly comforting. Was that something you used to have on special occasions or just a daily beloved meal?
More of a special treat, especially during the winters. I remember coming home from school, cold and tired, and then the familiar smell of the pie striking my senses. It a warm, enveloping, momentarily transporting me back to those carefree childhood days.
Speaking of comforting dishes, Chloe, I keep coming back to a dish from my childhood in Hangzhou, my mom's baozi. Simple, homemade steamed buns, this dish kept me full and content while studying.
Baozi? That's new to me. Is it something like dumplings?
Sort of, but not quite. They're somewhat like dumplings, but larger, round, and with a soft, fluffy exterior. Inside, they're stuffed with a mix of ground pork, ginger, and scallions. Ideal as a breakfast or lunch on the go.
Sounds practical and delicious. Convenient for a busy student.
Oh, you have no idea. The scent of fresh baozi drifting through our home is a memory so intense, it gives me that warm, fuzzy feeling every time. And with each bite, it's like being hugged from the inside.
It's amazing how food ties into our memories so deeply. It mirrors my experience with shepherd's pie. What makes baozi so comforting for you?
It's a bundle of joy, love, and warmth for me. Our family used to make them together. Everyone had their role. My little sister, for instance, loved folding the buns. My role? Tasting, of course.
Responsible job.
Somebody had to do it, Chloe. This tradition of making baozi bonded us as a family, and now, every time I make one, I am back at that kitchen table, surrounded by the people I love.
So it's not just about the dish, but also the experience and the sense of community it engenders.
Exactly. Nostalgia-inducing dishes, like baozi and shepherd's pie, create lasting memories and an emotional tether to our past, and they also offer us a sense of continuity and tradition. They're a pure reminder of home, of comfort, reminding me of where I come from and the woman I've become.
And they shape our relationship with food, in that they make us aware of both the emotional and physical nourishment they provide. It's emotional cuisine, essentially. So Evelyn, continuing our exploration of comfort foods, it's fascinating how not only our personal experiences but also popular culture plays a role, isn't it? What's that famous dish from the film Ratatouille?
Oh, that would be ratatouille, the vegetable stew from the film's namesake. It's a heartwarming homage to rustic French cooking, and it's quite popular.
Right, Ratatouille. The scene where the harsh food critic bites into the dish and is transported back to his mother's kitchen, it brilliantly captured the power of a humble dish. I am curious about Asian films. Any iconic comfort foods there?
Definitely. The animated film Spirited Away features a scene of the protagonist, Chihiro, eating onigiri, a simple rice ball, and her tears of relief and homesickness are palpable. That scene alone tells so much about Eastern comfort food. It's beautifully humble and straightforward.
That's poignant. Even these separate cinematic expressions underscore the same elemental truth. Comfort foods are miniature time machines. And when we see these dishes represented on screen, they resonate with our own memories and experiences, invigorating our emotional connection to them. In your experience as a bartender, have you noticed similar cinematic impacts on cocktails?
Yes, the White Russian, popularized by The Big Lebowski, saw a resurgence in my bar. Similarly, cocktails from James Bond sparked an interest in martinis. Curiously, though, the emotional connection is less intense. People seem more driven by the desire to mimic a cool character rather than associating the drink with personal comfort.
That's an interesting distinction, Evelyn. Movies can prompt us to explore new dishes or drinks. But our deepest comfort foods, they're more like old friends harking back to cherished memories. As we've mentioned before, these connections are dominantly formed during our early years. However, new experiences and associations can certainly add to the list. It's this blending of legacy and novelty that makes our culinary journey so enriching and exciting. So how do certain flavors or smells trigger these intense memories, Evelyn? Because I remember the taste of my grandmother's shepherd pie like it was yesterday.
Me too, Chloe. Like how the smell of roasted sweet potatoes takes me back to the Autumn Moon Festival in Hangzhou. But how these smells and tastes provoke such vivid memories, I've always wondered about that.
That's the fascinating part. As an engineer, I can explain there's a scientific term for this phenomenon called neurogastronomy. It's how our brains and our senses, particularly related to eating, interact.
Neurogastronomy? You're going to have to break that down for us, Chloe.
Of course. So it's a combination of our olfactory system, which is responsible for our sense of smell, and our gustatory system, which allows us to taste. When we eat, these two systems work in tandem. You know how when you have a cold and you can't really taste anything? That's because around 80% of our taste is actually linked to our sense of smell. So when our olfactory system is out of whack, it affects our perception of flavor. Listen to this. When the aroma from the food we're eating hits the receptors in our nose, a message is sent to our brain. The brain registers this information as a sensory experience which is tied to the food. Now, here's where the magic of memory comes in. Our brain also has this region called the hippocampus. It's like a warehouse for storing and retrieving memories, and it connects these sensory experiences to specific memories. So, say, every time we smell a certain food, it recalls the memory attached to it.
So that's why a particular food, or even just the scent of it, can transport us back to our past experiences. The brain really is fascinating, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's an incredible mix of science, nostalgia, and emotion, isn't it? All this wrapped up in the act of eating.
Chloe, you introduced us to the British classic shepherd's pie. How do we introduce variety into something so traditional?
Sounds tricky, but it does pique my curiosity. How do you do it, Evelyn?
I think it's all about not losing the essence of a dish. For instance, let's keep the base same with minced lamb or beef. But instead of regular mashed potatoes, how about adding a little French twist with pounds of garlic or some caramelized onions stirred in?
Interesting. So essentially tweaking the recipe while still maintaining the soul of the dish.
Exactly. Now, if we take an Asian spin on your grandmother's shepherd's pie, we could do something like replacing minced meat with marinated tofu, adding some traditional Korean gochujang for that spicy kick, then topping it with a sweet potato mash infused with Chinese five-spice.
Wow, I can almost smell it, and it sounds fantastic. But tofu and shepherd's pie? That's quite a leap.
Yes, but that's the beauty of fusion. It can breathe new life into the oldest recipes. And to be honest, I've always believed that cooking should be an adventure, not just a science.
You're right, Evelyn. Food is an expression of culture, and these variations just show how dishes travel far and wide, adopting and adapting new flavors.
Couldn't have put it better myself, Chloe. I've experimented with many classic dishes, adding my signature Asian twist, and they've been quite a hit so far. After all, who wouldn't want a taste of home combined with a dash of excitement?
Wow, Evelyn, that's quite a twist with the shepherd's pie. So here's a thought. Can we turn these cozy delights into healthier versions without losing their comforting essence?
That's an intriguing challenge, Chloe, but you might have more insight into it. After all, you've talked about mindful eating a lot. What's your secret to making comfort food healthy?
Mindful eating doesn't necessarily mean giving up on the stuff you love, Evelyn. It's all about balance. For example, if we're making a shepherd's pie, a good place to start is the ingredients we use. Can we think of any healthier alternatives?
So you're saying like swapping mashed potatoes with something less starchy, perhaps?
Bingo, Evelyn. Instead of regular potatoes, how about cauliflower mashed with some Greek yogurt? You'll get that creamy taste, but with a lot more fiber and fewer carbs.
Fascinating. How about the meat? Any changes there?
Instead of high-fat meat cuts, go for lean protein like ground turkey or chicken. And remember to load it up with veggies. They not only add texture and flavor, but also make your dish nutrient-rich.
Interesting. But Chloe, what if these tweaks end up altering the taste of that classic comfort food?
That's where being open to experimenting and accepting change comes in, Evelyn. The taste may change a bit, but isn't the idea of creating a healthier version of your comfort food exciting?
You make a compelling case, Chloe. After all, who says comfort food can't be healthy? So, Chloe, while we've addressed the memories comfort food can awaken, Does food also play a role in healing emotional wounds?
Absolutely, Evelyn. You know, food has this unique ability to soothe us in times of emotional stress. For instance, when we're feeling sad or anxious, we might lean into comfort food. It can, in a way, act much like a warm, cozy blanket.
That's true. Isn't that akin to emotional eating, though?
Well, yes. Emotional eating often means turning to food for comfort, relief, or even distraction. But it's not always bad. Food has been a form of emotional comfort since time immemorial. Millions of people turn to food when they're feeling low. It's more about how we handle that relationship.
Right. When does it become concerning then?
It crosses a line when it becomes our only coping strategy when we're stressed or upset. That's when it may lead to unhealthy patterns and weight problems. It's really the frequency, not the act itself, that could turn problematic.
So balance is key then, right? We should enjoy our comfort food, but also be conscious of the amount and frequency.
Exactly. And remember, food is also often at the heart of celebrations and remembrances. It might be as simple as birthday cakes or dishes prepared during the holiday season. These meals, they carry emotional weight, they tie us to our roots, our heritage.
Makes sense. After all, food is the fuel not just for our body, but for our soul too. Chloe, can you think why foods like shepherd's pie revive so many memories for you?
Perhaps it reinforces my belonging and connection to my family history. Our collective memories around that dining table, the flavors and smells. They're part of who I am.
Exactly. Now, let's transfer that experience across cultures. Consider, for example, the concept of comfort food in Chinese culture. It isn't just about the taste or nostalgia. It's deeply linked with our identity and cultural belonging.
Interesting, how so?
Well, let's take congee, a type of rice porridge that's a fundamental part of many Asian cuisines. It reminds me of my childhood in Hangzhou, the feeling of home. It might seem quite basic, but for many of us, it's definitely comfort food.
That's so beautifully said, Evelyn. Food truly is so much more than sustenance. It carries emotional weight. It makes us feel connected. And this is universal, isn't it?
Absolutely. From shepherd's pie to congee, every dish tells a story. It's not about complex flavors or expensive ingredients. It's about shared meals, family traditions, a sense of community.
Now we've been receiving some amazing comfort food stories from our listeners around the globe. Isn't that right, Evelyn?
Absolutely, Chloe. Our global family of listeners has shared some astonishing stories really highlighting the emotional bond they share with comfort food. Like this story from Miguel in Spain, who wrote in about patatas bravas, a spicy potato dish that his grandma used to prepare during family gatherings. For Miguel, just the thought of those potatoes is enough to transport him back to those joyous family dinners filled with love and laughter.
That's incredible. It's so poignant that a simple potato dish could evoke such deep emotional connection and vivid memories. And it aligns with what we discussed earlier about how comfort food is tied to our emotions and identity. I can relate to Miguel's story. The love and sense of togetherness he associates with patatas bravas is what I feel when I think of Mom's shepherd's pie. It's like food being the unforgettable language of our emotions.
I couldn't agree more. It's so heartening to hear these stories. We've also got one from Haruto in Japan. He has a deep connection with ramen. Every bowl of ramen reminds him of his late father, who used to take him to their neighborhood ramen shop as a special treat. Despite now living miles away from his hometown, a bowl of ramen brings him close to his father and his heritage.
It's touching how food can act as an emotional conduit, connecting us with our past, isn't it? The fact that every slurp of ramen bridges the gap between Haruto and his father, it's deeply emotional.
Definitely just shows how powerful comfort food can be, Chloe. It's not just nourishment, it's a recipe for the heart. Food, emotions, and memories are inextricably linked, shaping our relationship with what we eat. I think we can all resonate with that, don't you think so, Chloe?
I couldn't have said it better, Evelyn. Comfort food is truly food for the soul. Whether it's shepherd's pie, congee, patatas bravas, or ramen, they all seem to hold a special place in our hearts, don't they?
Stepping into the world of comfort foods, let's dive into the cooking process. Chloe, I'm sure your listeners would love to hear about my all-time favorite comfort dish, the warm tofu stew.
Oh, that sounds delicious. So how does it all start?
Well, it all starts with a good broth, and by that I mean one that suits your palate. but also one you're comfortable making. Personally, I use a dashi broth as a base for my stew. It's a foundational element in Japanese cuisine, but works perfectly with this dish too.
Dashi broth surely enriches the flavor, but how about someone who can't make it, Evelyn?
That's a great question, Chloe. Dashi is all about umami, but if you can't make it, you can substitute with a simple vegetable broth infused with a bit of soy sauce and sesame oil to mimic that umami flavor.
Great tip for our vegan or vegetarian listeners. Now, is the tofu the main ingredient?
Yes, it is, but I also throw in mushrooms, thinly sliced onions, and lastly, scallions. The heat of the broth gently cooks the tofu and imparts all these beautiful flavors.
Is there any particular type of tofu that works best?
Definitely, you want to use silken tofu for this stew. It absorbs the flavors better and gives a silky, smooth texture to the dish. And here's a key tip. Never overcook the tofu. It needs to just warm up, and it's ready to serve.
With this delicate texture, I can imagine it's the perfect comfort food. Now, what about accompaniments?
Warm tofu stew pairs wonderfully with a side of steamed rice, making it a comfy, cozy meal that's just right for those late-night cravings. And there you have it. Warm tofu stew, my favorite comfort food recipe, effortless yet flavorful, perfect for a soothing late-night meal.
Evelyn, that sounds incredibly flavorful and comforting, but what about those with dietary restrictions?
Such a pertinent question, Chloe. It's important to remember comfort food is a deeply personal experience. Many of us have dietary preferences or restrictions that we need to be mindful of. We can easily modify this recipe to suit various dietary needs.
Can you give us an example, Evelyn?
Absolutely. Let's look at vegetarian options to start with. One can replace the dashi with a vegetable broth that's easily available or homemade. If someone is allergic to soy, they can swap tofu with chickpea flour pancakes called saka. It's a delicious French dish.
Interesting. How about those on a keto diet or maybe gluten-free?
For those following a keto diet, the starch in rice can be an issue. Cauliflower rice is a great alternative. As for gluten-free options, just ensure the soy sauce you use is gluten-free. A good rule of thumb is to always customize your comfort food to suit your dietary requirements while still giving you that warmth and satiety.
Evelyn, I'm sure listeners are eagerly waiting for your comforting cocktail recipe to pair with this stew.
Chloe, I'm glad you asked. I've just created the perfect nightcap cocktail to complement our comfort dish, the Hangzhou-style sundubu jigai. I call it Hangzhou Twilight.
Oh, that sounds absolutely charming. How do you prepare it, Evelyn?
You'd be surprised how simple it is, Chloe. Start with a cocktail shaker. First, add ice to chill it. Then, for a bit of light sweetness, add a full shot of peach brandy. Then pour in 2 shots of gin to form the base. To balance the sweetness and lend a bit of a bitter, herbal note, add a half shot of junyang, which is a sweetened rice wine. It is slightly tangy and blends well with the gin and peach brandy.
Sounds both sweet and bitter. Kind of like memories, isn't it?
Exactly, Chloe. Blend and shake vigorously until the outside of the shaker becomes frosty. Strain the cocktail into a chilled glass. For a touch of elegance and to enhance the overall aroma, garnish with a lemon twist. This cocktail is a harmonious blend of sweet, sour, and bitter, much like our shared nostalgia associated with comfort foods.
That sounds so enticing. I can imagine sipping on one of those while reminiscing about good old times. But tell me, Evelyn, is this cocktail specifically tailored to pair with the sundubu jjigae?
Absolutely, Chloe. The warm flavors of the stew are perfectly complemented by the subtly sweet and tart notes in Hangzhou Twilight. It provides a delicate balance, cleansing the palate while still being flavorful enough to hold its own.
Well, there you have it, folks. A soothing late-night cocktail that pairs perfectly with our comfort dish. I'm already envisioning a serene night with Evelyn's stew and this Hangzhou Twilight cocktail. Comfort food, Evelyn. We often talk about how it warms our hearts and soothes our souls, but have you ever really delved deep into why it holds such emotional power?
I always thought of it as pure nostalgia. That sense of familiarity and warmth that comes from repeating a beloved childhood ritual. For me, it's the process of making simple dumplings, just the way my grandmother taught me.
Nostalgia. Absolutely, yes. It's certainly a key ingredient in comfort food. But there's much more to it than just nostalgia. In fact, there's a whole science behind it. Our bodies and brains work beautifully together to create that unique comfort food experience. Essentially, the smell or taste of certain foods stimulate our sensory neurons, which send signals to various regions in the brain associated with memory and emotion. These sensory signals can evoke powerful, often comforting memories, and also set off endorphins. Feel-good hormones, you know?
Ah, endorphins. No wonder a good old burger or a cheesy pasta can make us feel so much happier. Interesting to think of the science behind it all.
Absolutely. In fact, when you're feeling anxious or stressed, your body craves these high-carb, high-fat foods to boost serotonin levels, a well-known mood stabilizer. It's not fully clear why, but it's possible that our brains link these foods with feelings of comfort and safety.
Maybe that's one reason why we tend to reach for a warm bowl of mac and cheese or hot chocolate when we're feeling down or stressed out.
Exactly. Comfort foods, in a way, act like a natural antidepressant. They calm our anxieties and provide immediate emotional relief. It's a short-term fix, but quite effective. The trick is to not overdo it, maintain balance, and of course, practice mindful eating. You know, Evelyn, we've talked a lot about indulgent comfort foods today, but I think it's important to remember that comfort can also come from healthy foods. Foods that not only make your taste buds jubilant, but also your body thankful.
That's true, Chloe. The comfort isn't derived from the dish's health rating, but rather from the emotional associations we have with it.
Exactly. For me, even a simple bowl of steamed vegetables can work like a charm. How about you?
Oh, I have a few. Like the acclaimed Buddha bowl. It's warm, wholesome, and allows for lots of variations. Not to mention, it's incredibly nutritious.
Ah, the Buddha bowl. A delightful harmony of grains, veggies, protein, and a tasty dressing, loaded with nutrients and flavors. Definitely an excellent choice for a comfort meal. And it's customizable too. You can easily adjust based on your dietary preferences or whatever you've got in your pantry.
And let's not forget fruit-based desserts. They might arguably be the finest example of indulgent comfort foods that won't leave you feeling guilty. From poached pears to baked apples, all delicious and healthy.
That's right. Or just a simple piece of dark chocolate that has antioxidants. I find taking a moment to savor it can be a real stress reliever.
Agreed, but remember, like everything else, the key is moderation, and finding that balance is part of having a healthy relationship with comfort meals.
Right. Balance is essential. It's okay to have your mac and cheese or your slice of pie. But also, try to incorporate meals that provide nutritional benefits. That way, your body will be as comforted as your emotions.
Chloe, you've captured it perfectly. Eating healthy doesn't negate the idea of comfort food, and enjoying comfort food doesn't eliminate the importance of health. It's really about more compassionate, mindful eating.
Evelyn, as we're discussing comfort foods, I realize that different cultures have different comfort dishes. For instance, back in Boston, a comforting bowl of clam chowder was pure heaven. I'm curious, what are some comfort foods you encountered in your multicultural journey?
Well, Chloe, that's a fantastic question. I think China's mapo tofu would be a standout, with its fiery blend of flavors, the soft tofu. It's just so hearty and comforting. Then French would have their bœuf bourguignon, slow-cooked to perfection, a symphony of tender beef, red wine, and aromatic veggies. As for Korea, nothing says comfort like a bubbling hot pot of kimchi jjigae.
Oh wow, I'm not familiar with some of these dishes, but they all sound so comforting and delicious. It's so interesting how comfort foods can vary so drastically depending on where you are in the world, but they all fulfill the same purpose. They make you feel at home.
So true, Chloe. Comfort food is not just about the dish itself, but more about the emotions and memories it evokes. It's about reconnecting with your roots, invoking nostalgia, and giving warmth from the inside out. Even in the context of high-quality restaurant dining or luxurious tasting menus, there often exists a homage to childhood or cultural comfort dishes.
Absolutely. And that's the beauty of comfort foods. They may differ in ingredients, preparation methods, or even presentation, but they all appeal to our emotions and memories in a uniquely personal way. They're the dishes we're drawn to. At times of celebration, of sadness, of craving, it's this emotional connection that lends them the ability to comfort and heal.
And let's not forget how they make us feel closer to our loved ones. Just like my mom's rich, mapo tofu, or your family's shepherd's pie. It's clear comfort foods hold a special place in our hearts, warm our souls, and bring a certain wholeness that few other things can.
So folks, Let's embrace these comforting bites from around the world and celebrate the diversity they represent, whilst acknowledging the universal emotion termed as the comfort they offer.